The signal that changed everything. Adrian Cole had never wanted to build a weapon. He was 26 years old, worked in a basement laboratory at the Artemis Research Station, and spent most of his days talking to machines that never talked back. His job was simple, at least in theory. He was supposed to find a way to send messages across the galaxy faster than light could travel. The year was 2187, and humanity had spread to 3 star systems. They had colonies on Mars, research stations orbiting Jupiter, and small mining settlements in the Alpha Centauri system. But communication remained painfully slow. A message sent from Earth to their farthest outpost took over 4 years to arrive. By the time anyone received an answer, the question had often become irrelevant. Adrian believed he could fix this problem. He had spent 7 years developing a theory about quantum entanglement and spacetime compression. Most of his colleagues thought he was wasting his time. His supervisors had nearly cancelled his funding twice. But Adrian kept working night after night, because he believed that connection was the most important thing humanity could achieve. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning, which felt strange to Adrian. He had always imagined that great discoveries would happen during dramatic moments. Lightning storms, perhaps, or deep in the night when genius struck like a thunderbolt. Instead, he was drinking cold coffee and running his 400th test of the quantum fusion core he had designed. The core was small, about the size of a basketball. It contained a carefully balanced mixture of exotic particles that Adrian had spent 3 years learning how to stabilize. When activated, the core was supposed to create a tiny fold in spacetime. This fold would allow information to skip across vast distances, like a stone skipping across the surface of a pond. Adrian pressed the activation sequence and waited. The core hummed. The instruments flickered. And then something happened that he had not predicted. The fold did not stay small. It expanded rapidly, filling the laboratory with a strange blue light. Adrian stumbled backward, knocking over his coffee cup. Warning alarms began to sound throughout the station. He could feel the air around him growing heavy, as if gravity itself was bending toward the core. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. The light faded. The alarms fell silent. Adrian stood alone in his laboratory, breathing hard, staring at the core that now floated gently in the center of the room, surrounded by a faint shimmer that looked like heat rising from summer pavement. He ran every diagnostic test he knew. The results made no sense. The core had created not just a fold in spacetime but a stable bubble. Inside this bubble, the laws of physics worked differently. Energy could be amplified without loss. Signals could be projected across impossible distances. And most surprisingly of all, the bubble itself formed a protective shell that nothing could penetrate. Adrian did not understand what he had created. He only knew that it worked. Within a week, the Artemis Research Station had been transformed. Scientists from every human colony arrived to study the phenomenon. Military officials came too, though Adrian tried to ignore them. He kept insisting that this was a communication device, nothing more. He named his creation the Lumen Gate, after the Latin word for light, because he imagined it as a beacon that would help humanity reach out to whatever other civilizations might exist in the universe. The first official test of the Lumen Gate took place 30 days after Adrian's accidental discovery. The device had been moved to a purpose-built platform in orbit around Earth's moon. Adrian stood at the controls, surrounded by politicians and generals and reporters who all wanted to witness history. He activated the core. The blue light returned, expanding into a sphere nearly a kilometer wide. And then Adrian sent the first message. A simple greeting, broadcast in every language humanity had ever spoken, along with mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should be able to recognize. The message traveled outward at speeds that should have been impossible. It crossed the solar system in seconds. It reached Alpha Centauri in minutes. It continued onward, spreading through the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic ocean. Adrian smiled as he watched the data streams confirm successful transmission. He had done it. He had given humanity a voice that could reach the stars. He did not know that something was listening. 3 weeks later, the response arrived. It came not as a message but as a presence. The Lumen Gate sensors detected an approaching object, something vast and strange, emerging from the darkness between stars. Adrian was called back to the control platform. He arrived to find the military officials already gathered, their faces pale with concern. On the main display screen he saw the object clearly. It was a ship, though calling it a ship seemed inadequate. It was organic and mechanical at the same time, covered in patterns that hurt to look at, pulsing with colors that human eyes could not properly process. It was damaged, Adrian realized. Parts of its hull were torn open, leaking something that looked like liquid light into the vacuum of space. The ship stopped at the edge of the looming gate's protective bubble. And then it spoke. The voice that came through the communication systems was not human. It was layered, harmonic, filled with emotions that Adrian could not name. But the words it spoke were clear, translated somehow by the looming gate itself into language that Adrian could understand. "We received your signal," the voice said. "We are the Veiler. We have traveled very far to find you. And we are begging for your help." Adrian stared at the screen. Behind him, he could hear the generals arguing about protocols and threats and defensive measures. But all he could think about was the voice, and the desperation it contained. Humanity had wanted to make contact with the universe. Now the universe had answered. And it was asking to be saved. The Veiler's warning. The Veiler ship drifted closer to the looming gate platform, and Adrian could see now just how badly it had been damaged. Great gashes ran along its hull, some of them still glowing with residual heat. Whatever had attacked this vessel had done so with terrible force and precision. The military commanders wanted to activate defensive protocols. General Marcus Webb, a stern man with gray hair and suspicious eyes, argued that allowing an alien vessel near Earth's orbit was too dangerous. But Adrian convinced them to wait. The Veiler had come in response to humanity's message. They had come asking for help, not offering threats. After 3 hours of tense negotiation, a shuttle detached from the Veiler ship. It was small and smooth, shaped like a teardrop, and it moved through space with an elegance that human engineers could only dream of achieving. The shuttle landed on the platform's docking bay, and Adrian was chosen to be part of the welcoming committee. He had never imagined he would be the first human to meet an alien species. He was an engineer, not a diplomat. His hands were shaking as the shuttle's door opened and the Veiler emerged. They were tall, nearly 3 meters in height, with slender bodies covered in skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their faces were elongated, with large eyes that contained no pupils, only swirling patterns of silver and gold. They moved gracefully, almost floating, and when they spoke, their voices seemed to come from everywhere at once. The leader of the Veiler delegation introduced herself as Seraphine. She explained that her people had received humanity's message from across the galaxy. The signal had reached them at a moment of great desperation, when they had almost lost all hope. "We have been at war," Seraphine said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "For over 300 of your years, we have fought against an enemy we cannot defeat. They call themselves the KRYTH Swarm, and they exist only to consume." She showed them images projected directly from her memory. Adrian watched in horror as he saw entire worlds stripped bare. The KRYTH were not a single species but a collective, billions of creatures acting with one mind. They moved from system to system, devouring everything in their path. Planets, stars, even the empty space between them. They consumed matter and energy alike, growing stronger with each conquest. The Veiler had been one of the most advanced civilizations in their region of the galaxy. They had built great cities that floated among the stars. They had developed technology that could reshape reality itself. But none of it mattered against the KRYT. The swarm adapted to every weapon, evolved past every defense. Slowly, inevitably, the Veiler had been pushed back. "We have lost 17 home worlds," Seraphine said. "Billions of our people have died. The survivors have scattered across the galaxy, hiding in the shadows, hoping the swarm will not find them. But the KRYTH always find us. They always consume." Adrian felt sick as he listened. He thought about Earth, about the colonies humanity had built, about the children growing up on Mars who had never known anything but peace. He thought about how fragile it all was. "Why come to us?" General Webb demanded. "We are a young species. We have barely left our own solar system. What could we possibly offer against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far older than ours?" Seraphine turned her swirling eyes toward the general. "Because of what you have built," she said. "The device you call the Lumen Gate. We detected its activation from across the galaxy. The energy signature was unlike anything we have ever encountered." She explained that the Lumen Gate's quantum fusion core operated on principles that the Veiler had never discovered. The protective bubble it created was impervious to the KRYTH's attacks. The energy it produced was enough to tear holes in spacetime itself. In all their centuries of war, the Veiler had never found anything capable of truly hurting the swarm. Until now. "Your device was not built as a weapon," Seraphine acknowledged. "But it could become one. The most powerful weapon the galaxy has ever seen. With it, we might finally have a chance to stop the KRYT. To save what remains of our people. To save everyone." The room fell silent. Adrian looked at the Lumen Gate floating outside the observation window, glowing softly with its blue light. He had built it to connect civilizations, to spread understanding and peace across the stars. The idea of turning it into a weapon made his stomach turn. But then he thought about those images. The world's reduced to nothing. The billions dead. The endless hunger of the swarm that would never stop until everything was gone. How long do we have? He asked quietly. Before the KRYH reach us? Seraphine's colors darkened, shifting to deep blues and purples that Adrian somehow understood meant sorrow. They follow the trails of energy that civilizations leave behind. Your Lumen Gate broadcast across the entire galaxy. The KRYTH will have detected it. They will come. How long? Adrian repeated. Perhaps 20 of your years. Perhaps less. They are always faster than we expect. 20 years. It seemed like a long time, but Adrian knew it was nothing. 20 years to prepare for an enemy that had destroyed civilizations thousands of years more advanced than humanity. 20 years to decide whether to fight or hide. General Webb was already talking about defense strategies, about building fleets and fortifying the solar system. Politicians were arguing about whether to share this information with the public or keep it classified. Scientists were demanding access to the Veiler's technology. But Adrian stood apart from all of them, staring at the damaged alien ship and the desperate beings who had traveled so far to ask for help. He thought about the message he had sent into the void. A greeting. An offer of friendship. The universe had answered. And the answer was a warning. Humanity was no longer alone. But in finding connection, they had also found danger beyond anything they had ever imagined. The question now was simple, though the answer was not. Would humanity hide and hope the storm passed them by? Or would they stand and fight for a galaxy they had only just discovered? Adrian did not know the answer yet. But looking at Seraphine's weary face, at the scars on her ship, at the weight of centuries of loss in her silver eyes, he knew one thing for certain. Running would not save them. It had not saved the Veiler. It would not save anyone. Sooner or later, humanity would have to choose. The reluctant architects. The months following the Veiler's arrival were the most chaotic in human history. News of the alien contact spread quickly, despite the government's attempts to control the information. Within weeks, every person on Earth, Mars, and the colonial outposts knew that humanity was no longer alone. They also knew that something terrible was coming. Reactions varied wildly. Some people celebrated the discovery of intelligent alien life. Others panicked, convinced that the end was near. Religious leaders debated what the existence of the Veiler meant for their faiths. Scientists demanded access to alien technology. Politicians argued about funding and priorities and who should be in charge. Through all of this, Adrian Cole found himself at the center of everything. He had not asked for this position. He was still just an engineer who wanted to help people communicate. But the Lumen Gate was his creation, and everyone agreed that he understood it better than anyone else. So he was placed in charge of the newly formed Project Prometheus, a global initiative to study the Lumen Gate and determine whether it could truly be transformed into a weapon. Adrian hated the name. Prometheus had stolen fire from the gods and given it to humanity, and the gods had punished him for eternity. It seemed like a bad omen. But no one asked for his opinion on naming conventions. The Veiler remained in orbit around Earth's moon, their damaged ship slowly being repaired with a combination of their own technology and human resources. Seraphine became the primary liaison between her people and humanity. She spent long hours with Adrian, explaining what she knew about the KRYH and sharing whatever scientific knowledge might help. Adrian learned that the Veiler were not warriors by nature. They were artists and philosophers, builders and dreamers. Their civilization had flourished for over 10,000 years before the KRYH appeared. They had believed that the universe was fundamentally good, that intelligence naturally led toward cooperation and harmony. The KRYH had shattered that belief. We tried to communicate with them at first, Seraphine told Adrian one evening as they sat in his laboratory. We thought perhaps they were simply misunderstood. Perhaps they consumed because they did not know any other way to survive. We sent messages of peace. We offered to share our resources. Her colors shifted to dark gray, the Veiler expression of deep grief. They did not respond with words. They responded by consuming the delegation we sent. Every ship. Every person. Gone in moments. Adrian said nothing. There was nothing to say. The work on Project Prometheus continued. Engineers and scientists from every nation worked together, setting aside old rivalries in the face of a common threat. The Lumen Gate was carefully disassembled and studied. Its quantum fusion core was analyzed down to the subatomic level. Slowly, humanity began to understand what Adrian had accidentally created. The core worked by folding spacetime in ways that should have been impossible. It created a bubble where energy could be amplified infinitely, where the normal rules of physics simply did not apply. Inside this bubble, a single spark could become a sun. A whisper could become a shout that echoed across galaxies. And the protective shell that surrounded the bubble was even more remarkable. It existed partially outside normal spacetime, making it immune to conventional attacks. Nothing could penetrate it because, in a sense, it was not entirely there to be penetrated. Adrian had built all of this by accident, following intuitions he could not fully explain. Now he had to figure out how to replicate it on a larger scale. The first prototype was completed 8 months after the Valor arrived. It was a small vessel barely larger than a shuttle, equipped with a miniaturized version of the Lumen Gate's core. They called it the Spark because that was what it represented. A tiny flame that might one day grow into something greater. The test flight took place in deep space, far from any inhabited worlds. Adrian watched from the command center on the lunar platform as the Spark activated its core and vanished into a fold of blue light. It reappeared moments later on the other side of the solar system, having crossed billions of kilometers in less than a second. The observers cheered. General Webb nodded with satisfaction. Politicians began talking about production timelines and fleet compositions. But Adrian noticed something else. When the Spark had activated its core at full power, the energy readings had spiked far beyond what was needed for transportation. For a brief moment, the tiny vessel had output more power than Earth's sun. If that energy had been directed outward instead of folded inward, it would have destroyed everything within 1,000,000 kilometers. He mentioned this to Seraphine later that night. She listened quietly, her colors shifting through complex patterns that Adrian had learned to recognize as deep thought. "This is what we hoped for," she finally said. "And what we feared." "What do you mean?" "Your technology can save us. But it can also destroy. The power to fold space is the power to tear it apart. The energy that shields can also burn." She looked at him with her silver eyes. "You are building a weapon, Adrian Cole. Whether you intended to or not. The question is what kind of people will wield it." Adrian thought about this for a long time after Seraphine left. He thought about the KRYH, mindlessly consuming everything in their path. He thought about humanity with all its flaws and conflicts and capacity for both cruelty and kindness. He thought about the Valor, who had been peaceful once and had learned too late that peace required the strength to defend it. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he returned to his laboratory and began designing something new. Not just a weapon but a safeguard. A system that would ensure the power of the Lumen Gate could never be used for conquest or domination. Only for protection. Only for defense. It was a naive hope, perhaps. History had shown that every weapon eventually fell into the wrong hands. But Adrian had to try. He had to believe that humanity could be better than its worst impulses. Because if they could not, then perhaps they did not deserve to survive. The next morning he presented his designs to the Project Prometheus committee. They listened carefully, debated fiercely, and ultimately agreed. The weapons they built would contain limitations. Fail-safes that would prevent them from being used against innocent civilizations. Protocols that required consensus before activation. It was not a perfect solution. But it was a start. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the KRYH swarm continued its endless march toward the small blue planet that had dared to send a message of hope into the void.